Exactly. Hi. Welcome to the Story Corner. Thanks for stopping by. What do you see that's so exciting? We're happy to have you here. It's story time. um, before we get started, I like to ask, just for fun, just out of curiosity. I like to get ideas, and I love to cook. So I always wonder, what are you having for dinner, or what did you have for dinner? In our case, we already ate. So what did you have for dinner? We had. Oh, you're getting down? Yeah. We had crock pot lemon chicken and oven roasted herbed veggies, and it was so good. And then we had some cookies from yesterday, so we had lemon cookies. So that's what we had for dinner. And then also, oh, he's gonna try to push my table over. What are you doing? And then I'm gonna show off some stuff I've made because I have hundreds of them. So why not show off my cute stuff? Besides, if anybody ever wants anything, you can message me. Here it is. So these are some really cute little earrings. These ones are kind of cute because they have the inset. So they have the green sparkly center. As you can see, I'm trying to show, all the angles set in the little metal frame. So those are really cute. And then I have these snake ones, but they have little snakes with, oh, for heaven's sake, what's his name? Cocapelli, the little guy with the flute, the little Native American. I don't know if you can see him there. I only have one hand, so it's a little bit hard to show him off. But these are kind of, desert themed. There he is. Little desert guy on the snake. So it's like a charm and a snake. And then horseshoes. Cute little pink and purple horseshoe earrings for all those little cowgirls out there. These ones always make me think of my daughter because she loves horses and stuff like that. So cute little horseshoes. Okay, showing off the stuff I've made. Now we are reading Evelina, and we're in volume 2, chapter 23. I think it's 23. Look at him in his coat. He loves this coat. It's hanging up by the entry, and if I ever go anywhere near it, oh, hey, don't tip the table over, baby. If we ever go anywhere near the entry, he wigs out, and he's like, oh, and he points at his coat, and he wants it on, and he'll wear it all day. He loves it. Loves his coat. And it was actually kind of a cold day today here in Florida, so it was fitting to wear his coat. But what do you think you're doing, huh? What do you think you're doing? Okay, Evelina. Yep, 23. I was right. Okay, so let's see. Oh, yeah, at the end of this last chapter, Monsieur Dubois came and told her that he's in love with her. And then also Mr. Brainton wants Tom, his son, to marry Evelina so that Madame Duval will give her money to them because they're afraid that Madame Duval is going to give her money to Evelina, so they want her to marry Tom so that he'll get it. Plus, she's beautiful, so nothing wrong with that, right? As far as he's concerned, no problem. But he's an obnoxious little turd. That was a little harsh. Anyway, and then and so then when Monsieur Dubois heard that he was going to propose to her, then he felt like he had to let her know that he's madly in love with her too. Monsieur Dubois is Madame Duval's little friend that she's obviously somewhat attached to, so that's awkward. Her grandmother's little boyfriend. I mean, I'm sure he's way younger than her grandmother, but he's always there with her. Who knows why? Letter 23. July 3rd, and the last one was July 1st, so this is 2 days later. Oh, sir, how much uneasiness must I suffer to counterbalance one short morning of happiness. Yesterday, the Branghtons proposed a party to Kensington Gardens, and as usual, Madame Duval insisted upon my attendance. We went in a hackney coach to Piccadilly, and then had a walk through Hyde Park, which in any other company would have been delightful. I was much pleased with Kensington Gardens, and think them infinitely preferable to those of Vauxhall. Young Barrington was extremely troublesome. He insisted upon walking by my side, and talked with me almost by compulsion. However, my reserve and coldness prevented his entering upon the hateful subject which Madame Duval had prepared me to apprehend. Once, indeed, when I was accidentally a few yards before the rest, he says, "I suppose, miss, aunt has told you about you-know-what, ha'n't she, miss?" But I turned from him without making any answer. Neither Mr. Smith nor Mr. Brown were of the party, and poor Monsieur Dubois, when he found that I avoided him, looked so melancholy that I was really sorry for him. While we were strolling round the garden, I perceived, walking with a party of ladies at some distance, Lord Orville. I instantly retreated behind Miss Brington, and kept out of sight till we had passed him, for I dreaded being seen by him again, in a public walk, with a party of which I was ashamed. Happily, I succeeded in my design, and saw no more of him. For a sudden and violent shower of rain made us all hasten out of the gardens. We ran till we came to a small green shop, where we begged shelter. Here we found ourselves in company with two footmen, whom the rain had driven into the shop. Their livery, I thought, I had before seen, and upon looking from the window, I perceived the same upon a coachman belonging to a carriage, which I immediately recollected to be Lord Orville's. Fearing to be known, I whispered Miss Brington not to speak my name. Had I considered but a moment, I should have been sensible of the inutility of such a caution, since not one of the party call me by any other appellation than that of cousin or of miss, but I am perpetually involved in some distress or dilemma from my own heedlessness. This request excited very strongly her curiosity, and she attacked me with such eagerness and bluntness of enquiry that I could not avoid telling her the reason of my making it, and consequently that I was known to Lord Orville, an acknowledgment which proved the most unfortunate in the world, for she would not rest till she had drawn from me the circumstances attending my first making the acquaintance. Then, calling to her sister, she said, "Polly, only think, Miss has danced with the Lord." "Well," cried Polly, "that's a thing I should never have thought of. And pray, miss, what did he say to you?" This question was much sooner asked than answered, and they both became so very inquisitive and earnest that they soon drew the attention of Madame Duval and the rest of the party, to whom in a very short time they repeated all they had gathered from me. "Goodness, then," cried young Brington, if I would not make free with his lordship's coach to take me to town." "Why, said the father, "there would be some sense in that. That would be making some use of a lord's acquaintance, for it would save us coach hire." "Why, miss," cried Polly, "I wish you would, for I should like it of all things to ride in a coronet coach." "I promise you," said Madame Duval, "I'm glad you've thought of it, for I don't see no objection, so let's have the coachman called." "Not for the world," cried I, very much alarmed. "Indeed, it is utterly impossible." Can you imagine? She mentions that she knows him, and they're like, "Oh, good, you know him, so we can borrow his coach and get a ride home. Then we don't have to pay fare." Oh, that's so embarrassing. I would be so embarrassed. "Why so?" demanded Mr. Brington. "Pray, what's the good of your knowing a lord if you're never the better for him?" "Ma foi, child," said Madame Duval, "you don't know more of the world than if you was a baby. Pray, sir," to one of the footmen, "tell that coachman to draw up, for I want to speak to him." The man stared, but did not move. Pray, madame," said I, "pray, Mr. Brington, have the goodness to give up this plan. I know but very little of his lordship, and cannot upon any account take so great a liberty." "Don't say nothing about it," said Madame Duval, "for I shall have it my own way. So if you won't call the coachman, sir, I'll promise you I'll call him myself." The footman very impertinently laughed, and turned upon his heel. Madame Duval, extremely irritated, ran out in the rain, and beckoned the coachman, who instantly obeyed her summons. Shocked beyond all expression, I flew after her, and entreated her with utmost earnestness to let us return in a hackney coach. But oh, she is impenetrable to persuasion. She told the man she wanted him to carry her directly to town, and that she would answer for him to Lord Orville. The man, with a sneer, thanked her, but said he should answer for himself, and was driving off when another footman came up to him with information that his lord was gone into Kensington Palace, and would not want him for an hour or two. "Why then, friend," said Mr. Brington, for we were followed by all the party, "where will the great harm be of your taking us to town?" "Besides," said the son, "I'll promise you a pot of beer for my own share." These speeches had no other answer from the coachman than a loud laugh, which was echoed by the insolent footman. I rejoiced at their resistance, though I was certain that if their lord had witnessed their impertinence, they would have been instantly dismissed his service. "Pardi," cried Madame Duval, "if I don't think all the footmen are the most impudentest fellows in the kingdom. But I'll promise you'll have your master told of your sins, so you'll get no good by him." "Why, pray," said the coachman, rather alarmed, "did my lord give you leave to use the coach?" "It's no matter for that," answered she. "I'm sure if he's a gentleman he'd let us have it sooner than we should be wet to the skin. But I'll promise you he shall know how saucy you've been, for this young lady knows him very well." "Ay, that she does," said Miss Polly, "and she's danced with him too." Oh, how I repented my foolish mismanagement! The men bit their lips and looked at one another in some confusion. This was perceived by our party, who, taking advantage of it, protested they should write Lord Orville word of their ill behaviour without delay. This quite startled them, and one of the footmen offered to run to the palace and ask his lord's permission for our having the carriage. This proposal really made me tremble, and the Bringtons all hung back upon it. Oh, that would be so embarrassing. But Madame Duval is never to be dissuaded from a scheme she has once formed. "Do so," cried she, "and give the child's compliments to your master, and tell him, as we ha'n't no coach here, we should be glad to go just as far as Holborn in his." "No, no, no," cried I, "don't go. I know nothing of his lordship. I send no message. I have nothing to say to him." The men, very much perplexed, could with difficulty restrain themselves from resuming their impertinent mirth. Madame Duval scolded me very angrily, and then desired them to go directly. "Pray then," said the coachman, "what name is to be given to my lord?" "Anville," answered Madame Duval. "Tell him Miss Anville wants the coach, the young lady he danced with once." I was really in an agony, but the winds could not have been more deaf to me than those to whom I pleaded, and therefore the footman, urged by the repeated threats of Madame Duval, and perhaps recollecting the name himself, actually went to the palace with this strange message. He returned in a few minutes, and bowing to me with the greatest respect, said, "My lord desires his compliments, and his carriage will be always at Miss Anville's service." I was so much affected by this politeness, and chagrined at the whole affair, that I could scarce refrain from tears. Madame Duval and the Miss Brangdons eagerly jumped into the coach, and desired me to follow. I would rather have submitted to the severest punishment, but all resistance was vain. During the whole ride I said not a word. However, the rest of the party was so talkative that my silence was very immaterial. We stopped at our lodgings, but when Madame Duval and I alighted, the Brangtons asked if they could not be carried on to Snow Hill. The servants, now all civility, made no objection. Remonstrances from me would, I too well knew, be fruitless, and therefore, with a heavy heart, I returned to my room and left them to their own direction. Seldom have I passed a night in greater uneasiness. So lately to have cleared myself in the good opinion of Lord Orville, so soon to forfeit it, to give him reason to suppose I presumed to boast of his acquaintance, to publish his having danced with me, to take with him a liberty I should have blushed to have taken with the most intimate of my friends, to treat with such impertinent freedom one who has honoured me with such distinguished respect. Indeed, sir, I could have met with no accident that would so cruelly have tormented me. If such were then my feelings, imagine, for I cannot describe what I suffered during the scene I am now going to write. This morning, while I was alone in the dining room, young Brangton called. He entered with a most important air, and strutting up to me, said, "Miss, Lord Orville sends his compliments to you." "Lord Orville," repeated I, much amazed. "Yes, miss, Lord Orville, for I know his lordship now as well as you, and a very civil gentleman he is for all he's a lord." "For heaven's sake," cried I, "explain yourself." Why, you must know, miss, after we left you we met with a little misfortune, but I don't mind it now, for it's all turned out for the best. But just as we was a-going up Snow Hill, plump we comes against a cart, with such a jog it almost pulled the coach wheel off. However, that ain't the worst, for I went to open the door in a hurry, a-thinking the coach would be broke down, as ill luck would have it. I never minded that the glass was up, and so I poked my head fairly through it. Only see, miss, how I've cut my forehead. A much worse accident to himself would not, I believe, at that moment have given me any concern for him. Yeah, he could have hurt himself a lot worse before she would have cared. However, he proceeded with his account, for I was too much confounded to interrupt him. Goodness, miss, we were in such a stew, us and the servants and all, as you can't think. For besides the glass being broke, the coachman said how the coach wouldn't be safe to go back to Kensington. So we didn't know what to do. However, the footman said they'd go and tell his lordship what had happened. So then father grew quite uneasy, like for fear of his lordship's taking offence and prejudicing us in our business. So he said I should go this morning and ask his pardon. Oh, you trying to move the stroller? Because of having broke the glass. So then I asked the footman the direction, and they told me he lived in Berkeley Square. So this morning I went, and I soon found out the house. You did, cried I, quite out of breath with apprehension. Yes, miss, and a very fine house it is. Did you ever see it? No. No. Why then, miss, I know more of his lordship than you do, for all you knew him first. So when I came to the door, I was in a peck of troubles, a-thinking what I should say to him. However, the servants had no mind I should see him, for they told me he was busy, but I might leave my message. So I was just a-coming away when I bethought to myself to say I came from you. From me? Yes, miss, for you know, why should I have such a long walk as that for nothing? So I says to the porter, says I, tell his lordship, says I, one wants to speak to him as comes from one Miss Anville, says I. Good heaven, cried I, and by what authority did you take such a liberty? Goodness, miss, don't be in such a hurry, for you'll soon be as glad as me when you hear how well it turned out. Is it not going? So then they made way for me, and said his lordship would see me directly, and there I was led through such a heap of servants and so many rooms that my heart quite misgave me. For I thought, thinks I, he'll be so proud he'll hardly let me speak. But he's no more proud than I am, and he was as civil as if I'd been a lord myself. So then I said I hoped he wouldn't take it amiss about the glass, for it's quite an accident, but he bid me not mention it, for it didn't signify. And then he said he hoped you got safe home and weren't frightened, and so I said yes, and I gave your duty to him. My duty to him, exclaimed I. And who gave you leave? Who desired you? Oh, I did it of my own head, just to make him think I came from you. But I should have told you before how the footman said he was going out of town tomorrow evening, and that his sister was soon to be married, and that he was ordering a heap of things for that. So it come to my head, as he was so affable, that I'd ask him for his custom. So I says I, my lord, says I, if your lordship engaged particularly, my father is a silversmith, and he'd be very proud to serve you, says I. And Miss Anville, as danced with you, is his cousin, and she's my cousin too, and she'd be very much obliged to you, I'm sure. You'll drive me wild, I cried, starting from my seat. You have done me an irreparable injury, but I will hear no more. And then I ran into my own room. I was half frantic. I rarely raved. The good opinion of Lord Orville seemed now irretrievably lost. A faint hope, which in the morning I had vainly encouraged, that I might see him again and explain the transaction, wholly vanished. Now I found he was so soon to leave town, I could not but conclude that for the rest of my life he would regard me as an object of utter contempt. The very idea was a dagger to my heart. I could not support it, but I blush to proceed. I fear your disapprobation, yet I should not be conscious of having merited it, but that the repugnance I feel to relate to you what I have done makes me suspect I must have erred. Will you forgive me if I own that I first wrote an account of this transaction to Miss Mervyn, and that I even thought of concealing it from you? Short-lived, however, was the ungrateful idea, and sooner will I risk the justice of your displeasure than unworthily betray your generous confidence. That's sweet. She loves him so much she'd rather tell him the truth and have him be frustrated than lie to him or hide something from him, which shows how much respect she has for him, too. It's so cute how much he loves her. And him, it's really neat. You are now probably prepared for what follows, which is a hasty letter that in the height of my agitation I wrote to Lord Orville. Now for her to write to him, hardly knowing him without his requesting or inviting it, in that time would have been considered extremely rude. It's like these days showing up at somebody's house without calling first, you know? Like everybody has a cell phone. You don't just go knock on somebody's door anymore. They should know you're coming. It's like that. Very inconsiderate. People are like, what are you doing? Why didn't you call me? Why are you here? So to write to somebody was very aggressive, you know. Mm. My lord, I am so infinitely ashamed of the application made yesterday for your lordship's carriage in my name, and so greatly shocked at hearing how much it was injured, that I cannot forbear writing a few lines to clear myself from the imputation of an impertinence which I blush to be suspected of, and to acquaint you that the request for your carriage was made against my consent, and the visit with which you were importuned this morning without my knowledge. I am inexpressibly concerned at having been the instrument, however innocently, of so much trouble to your lordship, but I beg you to believe that reading these lines is the only part of it which I have given voluntarily. I am, my lord, your lordship's most humble servant, Evelina Anville. I applied to the maid of the house to get this note conveyed to Berkeley Square, but scarce had I parted with it before I regretted having written it at all, and I was flying downstairs to recover it, when the voice of Sir Clement Willoughby stopped me. As Madame Duval had ordered we should be denied to him, I was obliged to return upstairs, and after he was gone, my application was too late, as the maid had given it to a porter. My time did not pass very serenely while he was gone. However, he brought me no answer, but that Lord Orville was not at home. Whether or not he will take the trouble to send any, or whether he will condescend to call, or whether the affair will rest as it is, I know not. But in being ignorant, am most cruelly anxious. Let me see how long the next one is. Oh, it's a short one. I'll read it. Letter 24. Evelina in continuation, July 4th. So this is the next day. You may now, my dear sir, send Mrs. Clinton for your Evelina. Oh, sir. You may send Mrs. Clinton for your Evelina with as much speed as she can conveniently make the journey, for no further opposition will be made to her leaving this town. Happy had it perhaps been for her had she never entered it. This morning, Madame Duval desired me to go to Snow Hill with an invitation to the Branghtons and Mr. Smith to spend the evening with her, and she desired Monsieur Dubois, who breakfasted with us, to accompany me. I was very unwilling to obey her, as I neither wished to walk with Monsieur Dubois, nor yet to meet Brangton, and indeed another, a yet more powerful reason, added to my reluctance, for I thought it possible that Lord Orville might send me some answer, or perhaps might call during my absence. However, I did not dare dispute her commands. Poor Monsieur Dubois spoke not a word during our walk, which was, I believe, equally unpleasant to us both. We found all the family assembled in the shop. Mr. Smith, the moment he perceived me, addressed himself to Miss Brangton, whom he entertained with all the gallantry in his power. I rejoice to find that my conduct at the Hampstead ball has had so good an effect. But young Brangton was extremely troublesome. He repeatedly laughed in my face, and looked so impertinently significant, that I was obliged to give up my reserve to Monsieur Dubois, and enter into conversation with him, merely to avoid such boldness. Miss, said Mr. Brangton, I'm sorry to hear from my son that you weren't pleased with what we did about that Lord Orville, but I should like to know what it was you found fault with, for we did all for the best. Goodness, cried the son, why, if you'd seen Miss, you'd have been surprised. She went out of the room quite in a huff like. It is too late now, said I, to reason upon this subject, but for the future I must take the liberty to request that my name may never be made use of without my knowledge. May I tell Madame Duval that you will do her the favour to accept her invitation? As to me, ma'am, said Mr. Smith, I am much obliged to the old lady, but I've no mind to be taken in by her again. You'll excuse me, ma'am. All the rest promised to come, and I then took leave, but as I left the shop I heard Mr. Brangton say, Take courage, Tom, she's only coy. And before I had walked 10 yards, the youth followed. I was so much offended that I would not look at him, but began to converse with Monsieur Dubois, who was now more lively than I had ever before seen him, for most unfortunately he misinterpreted the reason of my attention to him. The first intelligence I received when I came home was that 2 gentlemen had called and left cards. I eagerly inquired for them, and read the names of Lord Orville and Sir Clement Willoughby. I by no means regretted that I missed seeing the latter. but perhaps I may all my life regret that I missed the former, for probably he has now left town, and I may see him no more." "My goodness!" cried young Brangton, rudely looking over me. "Only think of that lord's coming all this way. It's my belief he's got some order ready for father, and so he'd a mind to call and ask if I'd told him the truth." "Pray, Betty," cried I, "how long has he been gone?" "Not 2 minutes, ma'am." "Why, then, I'll lay you any wager," said young Brangton, "he saw you and I a walking up Holborn Hill." "God forbid!" cried I impatiently, and too much chagrined to bear with any more of his remarks, I ran upstairs. But I heard him say to Monsieur Dubois, "Miss is so uppish this morning that I think I'd better not speak to her again." I wish Monsieur Dubois had taken the same resolution, but he chose to follow me into the dining room, which we found empty. French, a whole bunch of French. I can't speak French. I would slaughter it, so I'm not even going to try. Something about mademoiselle, cried he. "Me?" cried I. Oh, so I guess he's asking, apparently, if she likes Tom Brangton, the young boy. No, I detest him, for I was quite sick at heart. Tu m'as ren la vie. I don't know. Don't laugh at me. Okay, fine, you can laugh. It was ridiculous, cried he, and flinging himself at my feet, he had just caught my hand as the door was opened by Madame Duval. Hastily, and with marks of guilty confusion in his face, he arose, but the rage of that lady quite amazed me. Advancing to the retreating Monsieur Dubois, she began in French an attack which her extreme wrath and wonderful volubility almost rendered unintelligible. Yet I understood but too much, since her reproaches convinced me she had herself proposed being the object of his affection. That's what I thought. I think he's way younger than her, but and he's traveling with her. It's kind of a weird situation. But yeah, she wanted him to want her. And of course, he wants the young hot girl, not the old, very obnoxious grandma. He defended himself in a weak and evasive manner, and upon her commanding him from her sight, very readily withdrew, and then, with yet greater violence, she upbraided me with having seduced his heart, called me an ungrateful, designing girl, and protested she would neither take me to Paris nor any more interest herself in my affairs unless I would instantly agree to marry young Brangton. That's cute. Frightened as I had been at her vehemence, this proposal restored all my courage, and I frankly told her that in this point I never could obey her. More irritated than ever, she ordered me to quit the room. Such is the present situation of affairs. I shall excuse myself from seeing the Brangtons this afternoon. Indeed, I never wish to see them again. I am sorry, however innocently, that I have displeased Madame Duval, yet I shall be very glad to quit this town, for I believe it does not now contain one person I ever wish to meet. Had I but seen Lord Orville, I should regret nothing. I could then have more fully explained what I so hastily wrote, yet it will always be a pleasure to me to recollect that he called, since I flatter myself it was in consequence of his being satisfied with my letter. Adieu, my dear sir. The time now approaches when I hope once more to receive your blessing, and to owe all my joy, all my happiness to your kindness. Okay, so there's this super short, like 2-paragraph letter so I'm just going to read it really fast. So it's letter 25 from Mr. Villars to Evelina. Berry Hill, July 7th. Welcome, thrice welcome, my darling Evelina, to the arms of the truest, the fondest of your friends. Mrs. Clinton, who shall hasten to you with these lines, will conduct you directly hither, for I can consent no longer to be parted from the child of my bosom, the comfort of my age, the sweet solace of all my infirmities. Your worthy friends at Howard Grove must pardon me that I rob them of the visit you propose to make them before your return to Berry Hill, for I find my fortitude unequal to a longer separation. I have much to say to you, many comments to make upon your late letters, some parts of which give me no little uneasiness, but I will reserve my remarks for our future conversations. Hasten, then, to the spot of thy nativity, the abode of thy youth, where never yet care or sorrow had power to annoy thee. Oh, that they might have ever be banished this peaceful dwelling. Adieu, my dearest Evelina. I pray but that thy satisfaction at our approaching meeting may bear any comparison with mine. Arthur Villars. Oh, so sweet. It's so cute. I'm telling you, it's so cute to me how much he loves her, cares about her. She's like his daughter. And it's so sad how he raised her grandfather and her mother and her. Like he raised three generations, and then terrible things happened to the her grandfather and her mother, and it's just so sad. And he loved them all so much, but with her, it's like he's tried so hard to protect her from the destruction of the other two, of her mother and grandfather, that it's so sad. It's so cute how much he loves her. Okay, well, that's all for today. 3 letters, but we will pick up tomorrow, see where it goes. And then just a reminder, after this one, we're going to start Anne of Green Gables. So that's going to be fun. I'm excited because that's one of my favorite stories of all time. I love it so much. Okay, I'm going to go. That's my baby crying, needs mama. So I will say goodbye, good night, and we'll see you next time.